In the previous episodes, we've explored the living current as a field of vitality flowing through the body, the land, relationships, symbols, and ritual. We've spoken about energy as something dynamic and participatory rather than abstract. But eventually, if you spend enough time working with currents and patterns, you'll encounter a question that has followed mystics, witches, shamans, and magicians throughout history. Are we alone in this current? Now, many traditions answer with a resounding no. They suggest that the current is not merely a flow of energy moving through reality, but something inhabited, intelligent, and alive with presences. Depending on the culture or tradition, these presences might be called spirits, ancestors, gods, angels, daemons, nature spirits, guides, or even powers. Others avoid labels altogether and simply speak of encounters with intelligences experienced through dreams and visions or ritual meditation or maybe altered states of consciousness. Whatever the language we choose, the underlying question remains the same. What are these beings and how do we relate to them? So in this episode, we're going to explore spirits as intelligences within the living current itself. We'll look at how they may interact with us, how different traditions understand them, and why discernment is perhaps the most important skill any practitioner can develop. Because if there's one thing worth understanding from the outset, it's that the spirit world is neither as simple nor as dramatic as popular culture often portrays it. In many ways, it's far stranger, more nuanced, and more complex than either believers or skeptics tend to imagine. One of the most common assumptions people make is that the spirit world exists somewhere else, a hidden dimension separate from ordinary reality, accessible only through mystical experiences or supernatural events. Many traditional cultures viewed that things quite differently. Rather than imagining separate worlds, they understood reality as being layered. The physical world and the spiritual world were not disconnected realms, but different aspects of the same living reality. And spirit was not somewhere beyond nature, it was woven through nature. The forest was alive, not merely as a collection of trees, but as a presence in its own right. Rivers possessed character and agency. Mountains carried wisdom and power. Homes, communities, stories, and even ideas could be understood as having their own forms of consciousness or spirit. And from this perspective, spirits are not visitors arriving from somewhere else. They are part of reality itself. When we speak about the living current, it can be helpful to imagine it as an immense ecosystem or consciousness, vitality, and relationship. Just as a forest contains countless forms of life, many visible and many hidden, the current may contain many forms of intelligence. Some may be vast and ancient, others may be subtle and fleeting. Some may be beneficial to human beings, while others may be indifferent or even harmful. This is an important point because mature spirit work begins when we stop assuming that every unseen presence exists solely to help us. Nature itself doesn't operate that way. The natural world contains beauty and danger, cooperation, competition, growth, decay, and transformation. If the spirit world is part of a larger living ecosystem, we should expect similar complexity there as well. So what is spirit? This is where things become more complicated because the honest answer is that nobody knows with complete certainty. Different traditions offer different explanations. Some view spirits as independent beings with their own existence and agency. Others understand them as manifestations of archetypal forces emerging from the collective psyche. Still others suggest that the distinction itself may be misleading, and that spirit and psyche are simply different ways of describing the same underlying reality. Imagine standing beside a river. Now, a scientist might describe water chemistry, erosion, and fluid dynamics. A poet might speak about beauty and memory and emotion. A local villager might talk about the river's personality, moods, and relationship with the community. Each perspective describes the same river, but through a completely different lens. The spirit world may operate in much the same way. As we've discussed throughout this series, the models we use are maps rather than territory. No map captures the whole landscape. What matters is whether a particular model helps us navigate experience responsibly and effectively. For practical purposes, many experienced practitioners find it useful to approach spirits as though they possess their own intelligence and agency. This isn't necessarily because such a claim can be proven beyond doubt, but because that approach naturally encourages respect, caution, humility, and attentiveness. And those qualities tend to produce healthier outcomes than assuming complete certainty about what spirits are or how they function. Now, when people first become interested in spirit work, they often imagine a single category called spirits. All right. In reality, traditions around the world describe a remarkable variety of beings and presences. Ancestors are perhaps the most universal example. Across countless cultures, the dead have been understood as continuing participants in the lives of the living. Ancestors may offer guidance and protection, wisdom, healing, or support. Their connection to us arises through bloodlines and family, community, culture, and spiritual inheritance. Then there are spirits of place. Now, many animistic traditions recognize the intelligence of rivers and mountains, forests, lakes, and landscapes. And these are not necessarily viewed as symbolic metaphors, but as genuine forms of awareness embedded within the living world itself. Beyond these are the gods, the saints, angels, daemons, bodhisattvas, and countless other beings recognized within specific religious and spiritual traditions. And such entities often emerge within long-established systems of myth and ritual, devotion and relationship. They are not simply energies to be manipulated, but powers to be encountered and engaged with respectfully. Some practitioners also speak of thought forms and egregores, intelligences that arise through sustained attention, belief, ritual, and collective imagination. And religions may generate them, nations may generate them, social movements, organizations, communities, and even individuals may contribute to their formation. Whether these beings are entirely independent entities or complex psychic constructions is often less important than recognizing that they can exert genuine influence. The living current responds to attention, and attention itself has a remarkable capacity to shape reality. Now, one useful way to think about spirit contact is through the idea of resonance. When you tune a radio, you don't create the broadcast. The signal already exists. And what you're doing is adjusting the receiver until it aligns with a particular frequency. For those who remember the analog radio, of course. Now, spirit work often functions in a similar way. So practices such as prayer, meditation, ritual, offerings, chanting, dream work, and contemplation can all alter consciousness in ways that make certain forms of perception more accessible. Now, certain locations seem to facilitate this naturally as well. Sacred sites, ancient landscapes, and places with strong emotional or historical significance often feel different because they encourage a particular kind of attentiveness. As resonance develops, communication may become easier. However, this communication rarely resembles a straightforward or conversation with another physical person. More often, it arrives through intuition or symbolic imagery, dreams, emotional impressions, bodily sensations, synchronicities, or sudden insights that seem to emerge from somewhere beyond ordinary thought. Because these experiences are often subtle, beginners frequently dismiss them. Yet subtlety is precisely how spirit communication is described in many traditions. The challenge is learning to distinguish genuine contact from imagination, wishful thinking, projection, or fantasy. And that brings us to one of the most important topics in all spirit work: discernment. If there is one skill that matters more than any ritual, tool, symbol, or technique, it is discernment. Discernment is the ability to recognize the difference between what we hope is happening and what is actually happening. It requires honesty, patience, and a willingness to question our own assumptions. The human mind is extraordinarily good at creating stories. We naturally seek patterns. We interpret ambiguous experiences according to our expectations. We hear what we hope to hear and sometimes overlook evidence that contradicts our beliefs. And this isn't a flaw so much as a feature of human psychology. A mature practitioner learns to work with this tendency rather than pretending it doesn't exist. Not every unusual sensation is spirit contact. Not every dream is prophetic, and not every inner voice is a guide. Not every coincidence carries cosmic significance. Sometimes a dream is simply just a dream. But healthy skepticism is not the enemy of spirituality. In many ways, it is one of its greatest safeguards. The strongest practitioners are often those most willing to question their own conclusions, revisit their interpretations, and remain open to the possibility that they may be mistaken. Another misconception often encountered in spiritual circles is the idea that growth requires complete openness. In reality, boundaries are essential. Most of us would not invite every stranger into our homes simply because they knocked on the door. The same principle applies to spirit work. Openness without discernment can quickly become unhealthy. Boundaries create clarity. They establish the terms of engagement and communication. That relationship is welcome, but exploitation is not. This is one reason many traditions begin spirit work by casting a circle. Such practices are not merely ceremonial theatre. They establish a psychological, symbolic, and energetic container within which interaction can occur safely and intentionally. It's important to remember that you have the right to say no. You have the right to end contact. You have the right to refuse requests, decline invitations, and disengage from any spiritual relationship that becomes disruptive or unhealthy. These principles are sometimes overlooked by people seeking extraordinary experiences, but healthy boundaries are what make sustainable spirit work possible over the long term. Now, at its heart, spirit work is relational, and every relationship carries ethical responsibilities. One of the more common mistakes in modern magical culture is treating spirits as tools or resources to be used. People sometimes approach entities as though they were vending machines. Perform a ritual, receive a result, move on. Now, many traditional systems take a very different approach. They emphasize reciprocity, respect, offerings, acknowledgement, and the gradual cultivation of trust. And this doesn't mean becoming submissive or romanticizing spirits. Rather, it means recognizing that interaction occurs between intelligences and that meaningful relationships require mutual respect. Now, if we seek cooperation, it makes sense to cultivate respect. The strongest spiritual relationships tend to develop gradually without or through consistency and trust and ongoing exchange. Just as meaningful human relationships rarely emerge overnight, meaningful spirit relationships usually require patience and time also. People often ask how they can tell whether a spirit relationship is beneficial. And there's no perfect formula, but certain patterns tend to appear repeatedly. Healthy contact generally supports greater clarity rather than confusion. It encourages growth rather than dependency. It expands awareness rather than narrowing it. It strengthens your connection to life rather than pulling you away from it. A helpful spirit does not usually demand that you abandon reason, isolate yourself from others, or surrender your capacity for independent judgment. Healthy contact tends to leave people feeling more grounded and more capable, more connected to reality. When a spiritual relationship begins encouraging obsession, fear, grandiosity, dependency, or emotional instability, caution is warranted. And genuine wisdom rarely seeks to dominate. More often, it seeks to illuminate. Now, one of the most empowering insights in spirit work is recognizing that your role is not passive. You are not simply waiting to be chosen by spirits or acted upon by unseen forces. You are an active participant within the living current. You possess agency, judgment, responsibility, and choice. Spirit work is not about surrendering your sovereignty. It is about expanding your participation within a larger living reality while remaining grounded in your own experience and discernment. The healthiest practitioners remain rooted in both worlds. They pay bills, maintain relationships, care for their bodies, and engage fully with ordinary life. At the same time, they cultivate awareness of deeper currents flowing beneath the surface of everyday experience. The goal is integration, not escape. Many traditions describe the spiritual practitioner as someone who walks between worlds. This doesn't necessarily mean traveling to other dimensions. More often, it refers to the ability to perceive multiple layers of reality simultaneously: the visible and the invisible, the material and the symbolic, the physical and the spiritual. The practitioner learns to move between these perspectives without becoming trapped in either one. Too much skepticism can blind us to mystery. Too little skepticism can blind us to reality, and wisdom lies somewhere between these extremes. As we've explored throughout this series, the living current contains both energy and intelligence, both pattern and presence. As our awareness deepens, we begin to recognize that we are participating in a vast web of seen and unseen connections. Some of those connections may take the form of spirits. Some become allies, some become teachers, some simply pass through our lives for a season. Yet all of them have the potential to deepen our understanding of what it means to live within an enchanted and interconnected universe. And perhaps that is the most important lesson of all. The purpose of spirit work is not collecting extraordinary experiences. It is not chasing visions or proving the existence of invisible beings. The deeper purpose is relationship. Relationship with ourselves, relationship with the living world, relationship with the currents that flow through reality, and relationship with the intelligences that may share those currents with us. The living current is not empty, it is alive. And when we learn to listen with patience, humility, discernment, and respect, we may discover that we have never truly been alone within it.